What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. I'm really excited right now because I haven't done a video like this in weeks and months. I don't know how long it's been, but I'm really excited to be here doing this one today, counting down the top X-Men keys to invest in. We have 10 books to talk about today, and per usual for these types of videos, the lower we get on the list, the hotter these books have been increasing on the market over the last couple of years. Before we get into it, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. Check out all the links in the description below, including the link to today's sponsor, popculturezone.com. Much appreciative to them. We're going to do a little clip later on in the video to talk more about popculturezone.com. But for right now, folks, we're going to get into it. Like I said, we're counting down 10, and let's just get right into the first book. Number 10 on the list is Uncanny XMen 191. Now, you might see a theme with some of these books. We're not going to be talking about just the big keys. We're going to be talking about some more affordable books, as is this one right here. And keep in mind, I will explain if I feel these books have MCU spec potential, but I also like to focus on books. When you set that aside, there's long-term potential for investment growth as well. And here we are, X-Men 191. This is the first appearance of Nimrod. For those that aren't aware, Nimrod is like an advanced sentinel from the future. I definitely think, however we introduce X-Men into the MCU, we will have some type of sentinels. I would love to see a lot of the future characters in Nimrod could be a player. Now, this book currently sitting on the market in a CGC 9.8 is sitting at about $160. Now, of course, these are rough averages of recent sales, so it's not an exact science. I always like to put that out there. 2 years ago, fair market value was sitting at about 140. That's a 2-year ROI, return on investment, of 14%, so it has increased slightly. All right. Now, a record high sold for $255 in a 9.8 back in April of 2021. You're going to see a theme here with a lot of record highs on this list because what was going on between spring and fall of 2021? Yeah, we had that quote unquote COVID boom. It went a little crazy. But look, last sale was for $150. That was in August. So it's right there, sitting right around the $160 fair market value. And it's still selling for higher than it was a couple years ago. Now let's move to the right of your screen. We have average raw. So the current average raw is sitting at about $10. And keep in mind, you got to take that with a grain of salt because it doesn't count for grade. It's basically if you take every raw book, no matter the grade, out at the values, divided by how many books sold, $10. So for this book, a mid-80s book, you could probably find a decent higher mid-grade for $10. 2 years ago, $8 an average. That's a 25% increase. So not a lot of movement on this book, but still a very affordable book that I do believe has room to grow. We're moving to book number 9. This is a good one. I've been talking about this book for a long time. I felt this book was undervalued for a long time. I think it's finally getting some love. Uncanny X-Men number 221, the first appearance of Mr. Sinister. We never saw Mr. Sinister in the Fox franchise films. I can't wait until we see him in the MCU. You see what I did there? Now, obviously, I don't have any insider information. I don't know if it'll ever happen. It needs to happen. Kevin Feige, make it happen. Current CGC 9.8 fair market value sitting at about $428 next to 2 years ago, $341. That is a 26% return on investment over the last 2 years. So that's decent. Record high, again, a little bloated, sitting at $589. Again, when did that sell? April of 2021. Last sale was $400 in August, so just a little under that current fair market value. And for most of these folks, the fair market value comes from anywhere between the last 30 to 90 days, just depending on how many are moving on the market. All right, so again, it's holding up decently well and still selling for more than it was a couple years ago. Now let's look at the average raws currently. Average raw sitting at $73. Later 80s book. You might have some newsstands mixed in there where newsstands are selling for a little bit more if they're high-grade newsstands because this is a later 80s, and that's where newsstand tends to matter a little more. But if you look at, the average raw from 2 years ago, $43, it's a 70% increase in value there, ROI. So this book has been moving, but I still think, again, regardless if Mr. Sinister shows up in the MCU, I think this is a solid long-term investment. But I'm going to make my case right now before we go further in the video. I always say this. I am not here to tell you guys what to buy, what not to buy. I'm here to give you my opinion mixed with facts and data, and you guys are to make your own sound purchasing decisions. If you're not willing to take the risk and looking at the investment side of comics, maybe it's not for you. But I will say that, this book could bloat up if we get some type of announcement, if we get the character showing up in the MCU, then of course it could dip off some. But I definitely think where it's sitting at right now, if you look at 10 years down the road and this character never shows up in the MCU, I think this book is still going to increase in value for that long term. And again, that's just my opinion. All right, moving on to book number 8. All right, we have an earlier of the Uncanny. Actually, this was still before they called it Uncanny, and it was the all new, all different, with, of course, the new team, Uncanny XMen number 105. This is the first full appearance of Lilandra, and I think that this is a great way for some of the X-Men to be introduced in the MCU. Obviously, we've got our first hint of mutants, and I think we're going to get mutants hitting us from different areas. Okay, Kevin Feige already talked about, well, we're not just going to introduce them as like this team, this X-Men team. I think we're going to see them pop up here and there, and we already know that the MCU has gone cosmic, and we know that they're expanding on the cosmic side of it, and Lilandra could be a character that is introduced that way, even if we don't have a full fleshed out X-Men team at that point. Current CGC 9.0 fair market value, sitting at a decently affordable $90 next to 2 years ago. It's $62. That's a 45% increase. A record high sold for $95 back in August of last year. So right there, this book didn't really bloat in a 9.0. And I sometimes when I'm not picking 9.8s, I'm picking the books with the most on the sold, not on the census, but the most sold over the last few years. The last sale sold for $91. That was in April of this year. So again, hovering right around that fair market value. Current average raw sitting at about $45 next to 2 years ago, sitting at a 27. A nice little 6-7% increase in value. This is a good one. I don't believe I have this book in my collection. And I mean, this is still decently affordable in my humble opinion. I might have to, I'm giving myself a little FOMO here, but I might have to look into it. But you guys know me. I tell you this all the time. Patience is always key. It's better to have patience. If you miss out on a few things because of patience, that's okay. You could take the losses because with patience, you're going to take more wins. And that is just a matter of fact. All right, guys, we are 3 books into 10 through these 10 books. We have 7 books more to go, but I want to take less than a minute to pause and talk about today's sponsor, PopCultureZone.com. PopCultureZone.com is an online shop focusing on hot new comics, including exclusive and incentive variants, CGC graded comics, and tons of other inventory, including pop culture toys and other collectibles, all at low and competitive prices. PopCultureZone.com ships all over the US, and if you are buying raw comics, they offer flat rate shipping of only $4.99. That's right, $4.99. Absolute craziness, right? And there's no taxes included, excluding New Jersey. Pop Culture Zone is also on eBay, where they hold a 100% positive feedback rating with over 8,000 completed transactions for this year alone. Make sure to check out the link to their website below, as well as their eBay link, so be sure to give them a follow there as well. All right, again, and remember, folks, the link to PopCultureZone.com is in the link below. Check them out for sure. They even offer pressing services, guys, and I'm getting some books ready to send off to them. There'll be a video for that. But moving on, we have book number 7, Jubilee. Uncanny XMen 244, first appearance of Jubilee. One of my favorite X-Men characters as a kid because she was obviously introduced around that time. I remember, I do believe I got it off the rack. I might have been a little young, actually. It may have been in the back issue bins for like $1.50 or something. I don't remember, but I got it for super cheap when I was really, really young. But I think, again, when you talk about characters that haven't been introduced in the MCU, that could, well, wasn't she in some of the later movies, but just as a background character, like in like Dark Phoenix and whatnot. But yeah, I think she was in that. is that the one that took place in the 80s? I don't know. Leave it in the comments. I think she appeared, but obviously underutilized. So, and we know that, Marvel Studios likes to diversify and to bring in, an Asian character. Um, that could be something that they put more focus on before introducing some of the same characters that they've already showcased in the Fox films. But again, regardless of movie spec, this has been a solid book for a solid character over time. I think it's going to continue that trend. Current CGC 9.8 fair market value sitting at $312. Next to 2 years ago, sitting at 188. It's a 66% increase in value over those 2 years. That's solid. We did have a record high. I was actually earlier this year in February at 390, not crazy above. And look, the last sale actually sold this month for 355, so that's still decently above that current average fair market value. So it just goes to show me this book is doing solid, maybe because of love for the character, or maybe people are thinking like me, this could be a character that could show up in the MCU, and now they're kind of trying to get this book before an announcement happens or anything like that. Current average raw, $53 next to 2 years ago, 21. That's a huge bump. 152% increase in value. But remember, guys, take that with a grain of salt, because that could just mean, obviously, if it's that big of increase, the book's moving upward, but there could just be like a few like near mint 9.8 potential raws that sell that can skew that average raw. So just be careful with that, okay? All right, guys, coming up on book number 6, Uncanny XMen, number 212. This is the first Wolverine versus Sabretooth battle. Epic, if you ask me. Undervalued again for a while, but I think it's finally getting the love that it deserves. I think a lot of these types of quote-unquote key books have been getting more loved over the last, 5 years or so, just because of the popularity in the evolution of the internet and social media, and of course apps like Key Collector and so forth, to where we are learning more about these books. We want origins, we want first meetups and team ups and battles, etc. So a current CGC 9.8 fair market value of this average is sitting at about 355 next to 2 years ago, 214. That's a 66% increase. ROI solid. Now you had a record high. Take this with a grain of salt too, and it was in August of last year, 455. But folks, that was a newsstand. Now this book came out in 86. So in 86, your newsstand to direct were still about 50-50. But you think that, well, it's a 9.8, there might be less 9.8 newsstands from that era out there, so I'm going to pay a little bit more for that. So that's why you kind of have this record high outlier. Last sale sold for 308 this month, and again, still well above, what it was selling for a couple years ago. Current average raw 18 next to 2 years ago at 10. It's an 80% increase. Again, as always, take it with a grain of salt, but still that is very affordable to find this book. And, even a mid-grade or high mid-grade for under $20, I think is solid in my humble opinion. Folks, we're halfway through the list. And of course, I got to remind you guys that if you are in need of comic book supplies, check out bcwsupplies.com. That link is below as well. You could use the discount code JOURNOS to receive 10% off of your order. Folks, that discount code, it never expires, and you can use it as many times as you want. So if you are like me and order supplies probably like every 6 months, then you can use it every time you order. And as I always like to reiterate, I don't only use BCW. I use mostly BCW, but I'll use, eGerber, some other brands there as well. But I do back BCW. I wouldn't partner up with any company that I cannot speak for myself and that I don't stand behind. And I say that truly. All right, but let's get to the bottom half of this list. Coming in at number 5. This is another one that I've been talking about for the last couple of years. This is Uncanny XMen number 107. First appearance of the Starjammers and Gladiator. Another one, again, the MCU can introduce these characters in the cosmic side of things without it having to heavily involve in like just an X-Men movie. And I think that would be absolutely awesome of them to do. Now, we're looking at a CGC 9.2 fair market value in this, and it's sitting at about $463 right now next to 2 years ago. 258. So you guys are seeing this ROI, this increase in value. It's going up as we get lower on the list. That's a 79% increase right there. You had a huge outlier for a record high for 650 back in October 2021. I think the peak was kind of cooling off right there, but right then, but again, you never know how sometimes when books are going to hit that record high. But then again, as I always say too, don't just look at outliers, folks. Outliers are very deceiving. Don't let an outlier or a last sale alone be the reason why you are okay dropping X amount on a book. Do your research, monitor what it's been doing on the market. Throw out offers to buyers and see if they're willing to bite. Now, the last sale of this book sold for $420. That was in July, so closer to the current fair market value. Current average raw is in about 127 next to 63 2 years ago. That's about a double in value right there on the raw end of things. All right, moving on to book number 4 on the list. This is another affordable one, but it's been moving. That's why it's so low on the list. This is Uncanny XMen 184, the first appearance of Forge, and Naze. I apologize. He's the shaman, and I know sometimes when it comes to comic books, we read these books and read these characters' names for years, and we don't know if we're pronouncing them appropriately. So if anybody actually knows the correct pronunciation, leave it in the comments, please, because I always like to get my stuff right. But Forge, here's something, folks. Forge was a character in the animated series. We know that, right? In the 90s. And we know that they're bringing it back with X-Men 97. Forge can actually show up in that TV show, the animated TV show, and it could bring hype on this book. I want to give another disclaimer, though, guys. I'm not sitting here trying to FOMO you guys out. Oh, a character's just showing up in an animated cartoon. Let me go FOMO on this book. Don't do it. Because I'm the first to say it has to mean something to you guys. Don't just go and blow money and drop money because something shows up in a property, okay? I mean, it's really cool. It's nostalgic for me if he shows up again, and that's all great, but don't let it be the icebreaker, okay? Current CGC 9.8 fair market value sitting at $227, so this book has been moving. Next to 2 years ago, $125. It's at 82%. Get this, record high, $339 back in October. That was a little rough, a little too high. 175 recently. There's not a lot of them being sold, though. I will say that. So again, be very careful with this if you're looking in the market. I personally don't buy already graded 9.8s. Like it'd have to be a rare occasion for me to do that. I would rather, invest in buying a high raw, pressing it, cleaning it, taking a chance. That's just me. Especially for more modern books, later 80s books. I do believe this book came out in 84. Don't correct me, or so mid 80s, whatever. Current average raw, $21. 2 years ago, $9, 133% on the raw side. But again, you got to take it with a grain of salt. All right, everyone. Top 3. Here we go. Coming in at number 3, we got some Silver Age X-Men. This is Uncanny X-Men number 10, or as folks like to call X-Men number 10. And it was the original volume 1, but depending on what databases you guys are using, X-Men volume 1 is sometimes contributed to the Jim Lee, but that should be called X-Men volume 2, technically speaking. But we know this is the Uncanny run, as it took on that name later on. First appearance of Kazar in the Savage Lands. So there's been a lot of talks about Kazar showing up in the MCU, whatever. Still think he's a cool character. It's a Silver Age X-Men book regardless. This would be something to where if I was, you're spending a little bit more money on this book. I say that, biting my tongue, a little bit of money. This is a book that if you're in the market for it, I think it would be a solid buy to find it for a good deal before anything happens with this character in the MCU. But if you want to wait it out and have some patience and you miss the boat and the character gets an announcement, shows up in the MC casting, shows up, boom, 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 and this book kind of peaks, I wouldn't be so hard on yourself because then I would still wait it out because I just don't, I don't know. I don't know how much this character showing up in the MCU could hold for the short term. So it could dip back off some, and then you could still maybe find it for kind of decently what it's around right now. But to play devil's advocate with myself, Silver Age Grail runs, like your Volume 1 Legacy runs, your X-Men's, your Amazing Spider-Mans, your Fantastic Fours, the Silver Age books, even the non-keys, even just considering inflation and the collectability of them, they're continually increasing regardless of what the a cool off in the market or MCU spec or anything like that. And we're gonna look at it right here. These numbers, we used a 9.0 and a current rough fair market value sitting around 2130. Look at that compared to 2 years ago at 1154. That's 85%. It's getting close to doubling in value there. Now, a record high was set in March of this year. So already when the market started cooling off a little bit, this book in a 9.0 had a record high sale. Again, it's more scarce on the market. It's rare to find these Silver Age keys in those higher grades. But a last sale sold for $19.20. So still hovering right around the fair market value. That was in June. All right. Current average raw, 264. So you're probably looking at more lower mid-grade, just as a guesstimate. 2 years ago, 148. That's a 78% increase in the raw book as well. All right, two more. And coming in at number 2 is Uncanny XMen 49. I was so lucky. I did pick this one up, I believe, I want to say early, it was either late 2020 or early 2021. And I got it for a really affordable price. I think it was maybe around a fine copy. I don't remember. And it was really affordable. And because I was looking at the prices now, and I know I paid nothing near this. So this is Uncanny XMen number 49. It's the first appearance of Lorna Dane, aka Polaris, and Mesmero. Got to give Mesmero some love here. Current CGC 8.5 fair market value sitting at 780. Next to 2020, it was sitting at 326. That's big. That's a 2-year increase in value. ROI, $139. Now get this. A record high in the 8.5 grade sold for $11.25 in May of 2021. And as I have here, huge outlier, folks. There was no, even during the peak. Now this was the peak back in May of 2021. There was no other book around that price. It was still hovering under the $1,000 mark. That was a huge outlier. Huge outlier. So if I was to come here and say, man, this book is trending downward, this is a $1,100 book, that's not accurate. Because just because it sold for that price once, and if you ever take the rolling average, it was never even close to a 1,100. It's misleading for me to say, oh man, this book is selling for around 700-800 right now. That's a great deal because this is an $1,100 book. That's not accurate whatsoever. So the last sale was sitting at $749, which is close to the current fair market value. Now, current average raw is 149, where a couple years ago it was sitting at about 74. That's 101%. That's double in value, and that's kind of like what I paid. I think I paid roughly around. It was under $100. I know that for a fact. It might have even been under $74. And, I got a nice, solid, mid-grade, fine book. So it just goes to show you what this book has been doing. All right, everyone. It's been a run. 9 books down, 1 more to go. What can it be? What can it be? Coming in at number 1 is Uncanny XMen number 64. This is a 15 center. This is the first appearance of Sunfire. So again, it's number 1 on this list simply because of what it's been doing on the market over the last couple of years. Now, the current CGC 9.6 is sitting just over $3,000. 2 years ago, just over $1,000. It's almost tripled in value, folks. That's a 2-year ROI, 180%. Now, you got a record high in February of this year for $33.60. And that was the last sale in a 9.6. So there's nothing to really gauge of what it's been doing over the last 6 months. But this book has absolutely been hot. And, talk about Sunfire. This is another character that I think Marvel could use to diversify their characters that they are introducing, especially when they start introducing mutants and X-Men characters. So, hey, but at the end of the day, it's a 15-cent beauty, and that's going to matter for the long term, regardless of MCU speculation. Current average raw sitting at about $89, and next to 2 years ago, it was sitting about 70. Now that's a 27% increase, but keep this in mind, folks. I really showcased a high grade book for a 15-cent book, 9.6. That's really high. Now there were similar trends all throughout the grade ranges in graded books, but of course there's much more affordable copies out there if you're looking for this book, especially if you're looking to find this book raw. There's still some decent copies out there that you can find for under $100, and that's awesome. That's where I don't own this book, and if I did, that's where I would be looking personally, because that's how I collect on a budget, and I don't put all my eggs in one basket. So folks, before we go, thank you so much for being here. Of course, I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below, what you thought of the 10 books on this list. How many of them do you have? How many are you on the hunt for? And I also want to know if there's any other books that you would have liked to see on this list. And I want to say one other thing. There was no Rogue books on this list. Why? Because I already did a full video talking about Rogue books for investment. So go check out that video if you're a Rogue fan, because it's all about Rogue. All right, but before we go, I got to do one last thing. I got to give a huge thank you to all of my members, starting off with my Patreon members. Thank you guys so much for supporting. If anybody is interested in becoming a Patreon member, that link is below as well. I will be doing a giveaway at the end of the month of August. I'll be announcing it like the first week of September. I'll be giving away a signed book. I do believe, oh man, I can't remember off the top of my head. Is it a Jason Aaron book signature? I got to remember. But anybody who is signed up by September 1st will be in the contest to win that. So a big thank you to all you guys: Trev, John Rowe, Nexus Cowboy, Comic Book Museum Verified, Randall Tex, Justin, Jordan, X11, Shelby, Rich, Tony, Larry, Michael, Alvin, Fletch, Pedro, Peter, Sagi, Dan, and Simon. You guys are absolutely awesome. I appreciate you guys so much. And of course, I got to thank all my YouTube channel members. You guys can join a YouTube channel member for just $1.99 a month. And it's basically just to support the channel for all the content that I provide you guys almost every day of the week. But you do get perks as well. I'll do some videos like this you get early access to. And I also do like monthly giveaways as well. And I'll be doing another giveaway. It's a signed Superman book. I forget the individual that signed the book. But again, first week of September, all of you guys that are signed up will have a possibility to win that book. I'm going to read them off. I got to give a shout out to all you guys. Jimmy G, he retired from the 49ers, and now he's just enjoying comic books. Sean, Paul, Shadow Rat, Remy, Tim, Frisbee, That Mountain Air, The Card Bay, Cakes? No, it's C-Axe. I can call you Cakes though, right? C-Axe. Louis Logic, Christopher Johnson, Pickle Ric Flair, Jack B, Mikey, Goonish Lurker, Brandon, Nexus, Lisa, Buddy, Josh, Ariel Red, Matt Labno, Battle Delta, Comic Journey, X11, Joshua, E-Dub, Mick, Arthur, Simon, Comic Ozzy. Guys, go check out Comic Ozzy's channel. He's got some good content as well. Kaya, B, Ghost Junk, Primetime, another great YouTuber, Primetime Treasures, guys, if you're not checking him out. Rupert, Louie, Tony, and Chris. Thank you all so much. That's what I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. Be well, and until next time.